Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our review of X. Yeah, so this is one that we have been kind of teasing for a while. This was initially supposed to be one of our early videos that we had talked about putting out, but the time just, I guess, never really felt right. I know we had discussed maybe seeing this in theaters, but at the time I had just become a new father, and everything was just kind of crazy in my life. And like you were saying before we recorded, that this was kind of like a slow release for us
Yep.
in the area. So
Yeah, because it's like right now when us trying to find Pearl is, we continuously look up showtimes every day to see what new theater it's going to be at because it's slim pickings as of right now. So we're hoping there's a big release. So I'm guessing X was like that. Now X was, I've talked about it. It's kind of a sleeper for me. I had heard good things about it, but it wasn't something I was anticipating in the slightest. So when it really started picking up steam is when I started looking at showtimes, and by that time I know it was available at our closest Cinemark, I think. So, because I know when we were making plans, that was where we were going to go.
mhm.
But so I didn't pay attention to its beginnings of a release here. So I was like, I didn't know if it had that slow release like Pearl seems to be having, because I mean, I guess I figured Pearl would have a bigger release, but as of right now, it's not really seeming that way.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I don't necessarily know why. It's not even like it's a really a jam-packed time right now as far as like big movies to compete with. Right now it's just like we're coming off of the two lowest grossing weekends of the box office this summer so far. So it's kind of like you'd think, you try to get as many big titles as you can in there, and especially with the reception of this movie, you would think that a lot of theaters around here would be, doing their best to clear a screen for it. But I digress. This was again something we wanted to discuss, and we just figured we'd get to a Splattercast episode at some point down the road, which we definitely will be. But yeah, I think with the release of Pearl coming out this Friday, figured why the hell not? Let's just get this review out to you guys so you at least know how we're feeling, what our major thoughts are on this movie. I know we kind of broke it down a little bit in a Sunday Scaries a few weeks back. I couldn't tell you what episode it was, but something had come up. Maybe it was even just our Pearl trailer review. We kind of talked a little bit
Oh
about
yeah,
our
I think that's
feelings
maybe
with it.
what it was.
Yeah, but this was, by the time we actually did get to see it, was pretty polarizing, I'd say, for my first viewing. I think we kind of felt the same way. We had heard all the hype. We had known that this was a big movie that everybody seemed to be really enjoying. And then that first viewing, we were kind of just like, well, it was good, but I don't know if it's like,
There were a lot of questions I felt.
yes. And then we kind of get announced because with the VOD release, we didn't have the post credit scene like the people who saw it in theaters did. So
Yep.
I had literally found out just after finishing it and calling you that there was a Pearl teaser trailer. And that's when we found out about Pearl. That's when we found out this movie was coming out in September. So it's just kind of crazy that it's like we had this movie come out in March and now we're getting the sequel or prequel in September. And then we also found out the information of this being a trilogy that Ty West already had confirmed, and that this is going to be the middle portion of this story. So, with all that in mind, going back on a repeat viewing, I really enjoyed this movie.
Yes.
I like this a lot. I think that even though, and I think a big part of it too for me is, you go in with so much hype. It's kind of the fear that I have with the second weekend for Barbarian, because as of recording this, we're just coming off of its initial release where it did top the box office and made over
Oh
10
yeah.
million. Pretty great for it. That's awesome. But it's one of those things where I'm just afraid because everybody is kind of talking about Barbarian like they talked about X, where it's like, those people who are expecting this mind-blowing experience may be a little underwhelmed, kind of like we were.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, like, going into X, going into X, I was anticipating it. Coming out of X, I was, I guess, a little lukewarm on it. Um, but because it was like, I'm a big story guy, and going in from beginning to end, great horror film. But I was looking for, a little something more out of it just because of so much hype around it. I was like, oh, so this has got to be being Ty West, this has got to be, a very complete film, very cinematic, great storytelling. And the storytelling was a little disjointed in a sense where I was wanting something more. And then me and you had talked, and you were like, "No, this is a trilogy, and X is the middle." And we had talked about that ending credit scene with Pearl and stuff like that. And I went from being lukewarm on it to loving this movie because
Mhm.
I love that he released the middle piece here. We're not supposed to know exactly every little tidbit here. So then that made it easier for me to just love this film for the bit that we got, because there is more to come. So because it's like from beginning to end, X, I think there's great pacing here, very cinematic. I mean, there are so many just tension filled scenes. So it's like going into us. Well, me first watching it, I can speak for words. There was a lot of anticipation here. I was excited for it because I kept hearing so many great things about it. So like with Barbarian, uh, there's been so much praise for it thus far that maybe that there are those hopes that it can't live up to. So I mean, like I think there's a lot of anticipation for Pearl as well because now it's kind of got to fill in some of the story that from that beginning story to lead into X to make sometimes those kind of bookends of films, if we're giving us the middle and now we're going to get a prequel and then we're going to get a sequel, sometimes especially that prequel affects that original film a little bit because it's like, well, you can start picking parts away. So it's like I'm curious to see what Pearl's going to do to our kind of our viewing of X next time around.
Yeah, no, I would agree that that's a good point to make. But I feel like with Pearl, it's kind of has the added benefit of, and again, I think this is a really smart release strategy, and I think that that's just kind of where I'm gonna land with this. Like when I talk about the way that this is set up primarily, because I think that this would be different if we had to wait 2 years between X and Pearl. I feel like it's good to know, but to kind of sit there and anticipate for so long, and then let's say that Pearl isn't filling in as many gaps as we thought. But it's kind of more just fleshing out more backstory for certain characters, but not really progressing much. I feel like the disappointment would be a lot higher. But we've had to wait what, like 6-8 months,
Yeah,
and now we're getting the prequel. So it's like if they can really set this off to where maybe we get the third one. I don't know when that's slated to come out. I'm kind of really hoping for a post credit scene in Pearl, to kind of at least announce it, so that maybe even if it's like we have to wait a little longer, so it's like next summer,
yeah,
like that's okay, because it's like we kind of have these movies in succession together. But yeah, I think that Pearl might have a little bit of an easier chance too, just because this one was the first exposure, and it's ballsy to release this like the second of a trilogy first, because normally the second one you don't have to worry about much because you have established characters, you have established tone, you have established everything. But no, so this was kind of like, with me first, like my first viewing, I felt like I kind of needed some more. I needed more explanation. I wanted more from this movie. But again, now knowing what I know and kind of my initial revisits, because since this movie's come out, I bought it on Blu-ray and I've watched it probably about 4 or 5 times over the last year. Just because I think it's a quick watch. And that's one of my first real positives I'll give this, is like, no matter how many times you watch this movie does not drag. Like, you kind of get right into it. I think that a lot of that has to go with the characters, and just how, like, not only interesting but funny they are, and just the setting and the presentation just being so top notch. Because I'm a huge Texas Chainsaw fan. Like, I don't have much in my background to kind of do it. I have my Leatherface back there, but the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. I'm talking like top 5, top 10 material, for me. And this movie, like it's been compared a ton of times, feels like that first movie in tone and presentation. And so it's like it's real easy for me to get sucked into that world.
Yeah, it absolutely has Texas Chainsaw vibes, 100%. Where I don't know if you'd call it Southern horror in a sense, where it's got that kind of uh, going into this, especially on this watch, where I've seen it a few times, hadn't revisited it in probably in a couple months, so. Going back into it now, and me and you had this discussion. I can remember it may have been on one of the episodes of something that we did, and you were talking about Ty West being, a good candidate to do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre after what we had
Hmm.
seen with X, and it's like that kind of that suggestion stuck with me, especially on this viewing here, where absolutely the same vibes here. Like this could have been if we went to the farm and Leatherface was in his little den, coming sliding open a door and coming out. Absolutely would be. You could start X and then edit Leatherface into it, and I don't think anyone would notice any difference because it has the exact same tone.
Oh, that would be great. See, like I love that. Like you could even take the premise of X and overlay Leatherface into it in the
It
sense of
works.
just like, yeah, he's with the family. These are his parents. Like, if we're talking full-blown reboot,
Yeah.
like that, this is just a little bit of change to the story. Um, but
And,
yeah,
like, I was like, not that we're going on our whole tangent here, but as I was watching it, and that van's coming to the farm and stuff, and I'm getting those vibes, I'm like, you could legitimately have done a sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre where it's like, oh, all this happened, 10 years ago at this farm. It's abandoned. Let's go film a porno there. It turns out Leatherface is still there. And then, we just pick up where we left off. It would be so believable. It fits. It would work so well.
it would do a lot better than the current iterations that we've been getting, I would say.
They picked the wrong
Um,
people to make them.
I know, but I mean, we should talk a little bit more. We'll pull back from our fantasies as usual. Like we love to pitch our own ideas. We're creative heads, so like give us a break. But yeah, coming back to the movie itself, um, this is one of those things where I went into it with kind of those expectations. The trailer, a lot like Barbarian, and I mean, I'm gonna keep comparing them because I think between this, the Black Phone, and Barbarian, those are probably the three major.
Those are the
Like,
tent poles of 2022.
yes, they were. We've gotten a lot of great horror.
Yeah.
We've gotten a lot of good
We'll throw
stuff,
the
but
curse
like,
in there.
yeah, and yeah, the Cursed early on, definitely. But it was one of those things where it's like these three, especially, I think, are really
Absolutely.
setting themselves apart. And I mean, I can't really put Black Phone into this conversation other than saying it's a great original horror film. But like these two, in their presentation of the trailers, they don't tell you much. They kind of give you a little bit, so you kind of think you know what you're getting into, but you really don't.
Yeah, it'll take you
And
on another ride, just like
it does.
Barbarian.
It does because you kind of they're you open up with our characters kind of you get the lay of the land with them. You got a film student who's been hired by this guy who's he owns a strip club. He's looking for his way to get famous and get his friends out of there, and they all make a bunch of money. And like this is right on the cusp of home video market porn becoming a thing, and like he is kind of talking about it like we're going to change the industry and we're going to change the world by doing this. And really they do. I mean, if you look at history, like it changes the whole market and how people consume that stuff, because before you'd have to go American Werewolf style to a little porno theater and sit there and I guess jerk your dick in the theater with random strangers around you, you know what I mean? But
Been
this
there.
would literally this would literally change the face of the porn industry forever.
Yes.
And
Um,
like they really harken on that, and I think it's really smart to show that these characters aren't your. I guess what I'm trying to say is that they come off more intellectual. They come off a little bit smarter. They are not those archetypes that you normally expect with these kind of movies.
yeah,
Everybody's got a little bit of personality to them, and nobody feels just like they're there to show. Especially on the female side, like nobody's just there for tits and ass. Like
yeah,
you see it, but there's layers to them. There's
yeah,
so much more to their characters, and I think that's really the big thing that I can throw out there is that I really enjoy everybody in our group because they're all so layered and the conversation and the time that we get with them in this first half, it's great. And it's really, it just shows that, you know, you can make these kind of dirty slashers from like the 70s and 80s and add a little bit more, you know, something to it, and you get a great movie.
Yeah, and like, you know, looking at the premise here, if you read just a tiny synopsis here, not knowing too much of like not having the hindsight of knowing what it is or going have already seen it and then going back and reading that synopsis, this could very much turn out like how it turned into like a Rob Zombie film,
Oh yeah.
where it's like, oh, it's gratuitous sex, all this other things. But one of the things you really have to look at, and I think it's very smart storytelling here, and maybe it goes overlooked because, you know, so much, a lot of sex and horror kind of goes hand in hand. So sometimes, especially in the
Mhm.
80s, where gratuitous breast shots, things like
I
that.
mean, even in the 70s, they were basically considered cousin genres of each other.
Yes, I mean, you look at Wes Craven's career, and I mean that
Mhm.
tells you everything. But so it's like looking at this. This is smart storytelling because even now, maybe people can relate to this even more so now, where not completely, but in a sense, we're in kind of such a little bit of a cultural shift in terms of um, pronouns, you know, things like this, gender. A lot of different things are conversation pieces now. Race, a lot of things are becoming, you know, maybe a younger generation is a little more aware of certain things. Whereas looking in the 70s, and you know, I, we have a thing where it's like in the 70s, and so I've done some research in terms of the culture in the 70s. There was a big cultural shift with Vietnam and things like that, where looking at Pearl and Howard are coming from a way different generation than the people coming into the farm. So it's like you kind of have this meeting of two different generations, one not understanding, thinking that these guys are just smut filmmakers. And it's like, you know, I guess at a bare bones, maybe you could say that, but they're very more open. It's a different time, it's a different culture. And you have these two different cultures kind of almost butting heads, and we kind of see it right there on the farm. So it's like there is a lot of the storytelling here is very smart. And you can't just attribute it to like a smut kind of characteristic of the film. I think Ty West is looking at this and trying to do a little bit of a commentary of the 70s because especially like me and you, we didn't live through that, so we don't
Yeah,
know. We can do research on it, but seeing it on film play out here tells a very unique moment in time. So I think that kind of the addition of making a dirty film on this farm, you know, you could have made that couple a young couple if you wanted to, and you wouldn't really have that kind of interplay. So it's all very premeditated here in terms of putting a very interesting story in a horror movie.
I agree. And you know, when we kind of get into this, one of the really cool key factors that I didn't realize until I think I had maybe been halfway through the movie, and because it's VOD, I had my phone on me, so like I can kind of look some things up as I go along. I know it's just some of you that's going to be gross and stupid, but I'm sorry, it's just the world we live in. I like to do research, especially because you know for the podcast, I'm on my phone and rewatching a movie that I've seen, like it because I watch a movie like 3 or 4 times for the show. So it's like most of my viewings, I'm on my phone getting details, facts, looking into things when I'm watching it again. But for this, it shocked me to find out that Mia Goth was playing two roles.
Yeah,
And just because I literally, if you would have put those two side by side and not told me that, I would have just thought they were different people.
yeah,
So again, that goes to just showing the amount of detail, effort, and work that was put into that. But even her performance, I mean, like she is so vastly different. And I mean, like they do seem like two totally different people, even though in the story itself, they kind of are trying to allude, in my feelings, of like kind of this, no, I wouldn't say that they're related, but this similarity to them. It's almost, it feels like this omnipotent presence or aura around the pair of these two, that they're
yeah,
drawn to each other. They're almost the antithesis of one another. And you know, I thought that that was a really smart play and a very unique play for our villains, which end up being the two old folks on the farm. And something that I had teased to you that I wanted to bring up on this review, I teased to you this probably weeks ago. I don't know if we even ever talked about it, but I was listening to the Dead Meat podcast about this movie. And before we started, I threw it back on again just to listen to their thoughts. And I'm not taking credit for this at all, but this is kind of their interpretation of it. And so there's a key scene that even after I enjoyed the movie that always bugged me. And it is, and I'm kind of jumping around here, but it's when Jenna Ortega's character gets locked in the basement
Yeah.
and there's that guy strung up down there. And to me, it always just kind of felt like, well, everything's working. That just seems kind of random. The only thing I can think of is like, okay, so they've killed people and stuff before. That's all we're really showing here. But they have a different interpretation in the sense that they think that Pearl is so sexually charged. And when she's dissatisfied, she gets violent and she kills and she murders. And you know, obviously her husband, and I don't know why his name is
Howard.
like Howard, there we go, with him always talking about his heart and how he can't satisfy her and everything because he's worried he'll have a heart attack and die. You know, it's a big risk for him. So when young people show up to rent this cabin, young men especially, they take them hostage and they throw them in the basement, and Pearl can kind of use them at her leisure. So that way she can be satisfied and almost keep the beast at bay. And I was just like, you know, that's a really interesting interpretation. And then I watched this movie again with that in mind, and like, it's clear as day to me that that's, I think, what Ty West was trying to say with this is because she's, and I'm curious with the trailer for Pearl, that does kind of seem like where it's going.
Yeah. You know, I'm curious as well. Because I don't know. With this, I don't know, that take for me, it makes sense, but then also in Howard's demeanor, I think there is a little bit of an inconsistency there where he, when he's going to look for her on the farm, and Jackson comes and says, you know, oh, I'll help you do that, and they're walking through there, and then as he is walking up to him saying, we better get back to the farm, you know, he kind of goes on this little tangent about, you know, coming onto the farm to entice his wife. He seems very defensive at that, where it's like, and not necessarily, if that was the case, I feel like maybe he would have led Jackson to the basement and not necessarily Jenna Ortega's character.
Well,
Where
see, Jenna Ortega was just a circumstance of having to lock her in there because, you know, at that point, everybody was dead and he was just trying to corral her at that point.
well, I guess for me, why not just kill her? Where, you know, I'm working through it as now, because I was always curious as to Jenna Ortega's. I think, again, this raises a lot of questions for us because we don't have the full story yet in terms of, you know, Jenna Ortega being in the basement. And I believe Howard had mentioned to Pearl that he had one in the basement that he wanted to show her, and she didn't have any interest in her. So I was just curious as to like what that whole inner workings is, because obviously it's not explained yet. But if that was the case and they were bringing men to the basement, I feel like Jackson would have been the one, or Wayne or RJ would have been the ones that would have been in the basement. At least would have been like again, we're working through this. At least to have a scene where we're trying to lure Wayne in the basement, but he doesn't go, you know, and plans get muddled and then he gets shot. Or same thing with Jackson, to at least show this is what we're doing. Because yeah, like the scene with the character in the basement that's strung up is, you know, because I looked at it originally and was like, is that the person on the milk carton? And you know, doing a search on IMDb, you know, under the fun facts, it does say that is the person. I
Yep.
was like, oh, okay. So I didn't know what they were trying to say there. Like what you're saying makes sense, but then also doesn't make sense in terms of the Jackson interaction, where it's like,
And
but maybe it's a voyeuristic kind of cuckold, self-hating type
it could
thing.
very well be that too, and that's the twisted part of this couple, and
Yeah,
how it's like they're working through their own marital issues and their own, you know, like frustrations, and they're taking it out on these poor unsuspecting people who
yeah,
are just coming to stay in their cabin that they have available to people. And it's kind of gross and kind of messed up, and I'm very much like you. I want I'm hoping that Pearl will kind of expand upon that a little bit so we
Yeah.
get a little bit more. Clearly, we know we're going to get a little bit more into Pearl's mindset because that's one thing we don't really get is we only see shades of it because they don't spend a lot of time going deep into her psyche and why she is the way she is.
Yeah.
And Howard, not innocent in the slightest, but I mean, clearly loves his wife and will do anything for her
Yeah.
and
And
do what she needs.
And looking at Pearl, there's clearly some sort of sign of dementia. It looks like interplaying with her in terms of roaming around and things like that, which I think there was also maybe some sort of commentary on there. So I'm kind of intrigued to see where this is going to go in terms of she looks pretty, I guess you'd say free in the Pearl trailer, where again, probably very much like the Mia Goth character in X. So I'm curious to see what kind of parallels they draw there, and kind of seeing this young version of Howard and Pearl, because I want to know how this all started, because I think
Mm,
that's really going to interlock what we had seen in X. If this kind of voyeuristic cuckold version kind of starts, if Howard, you assume in X that maybe Howard's age plays a part in his heart ailment. But what if this was when he was young and this has always been a constant thing? So it's like we kind of get this almost Psycho kind of looking through a doorway or a wall
mhm.
while Pearl is having her way with these passerbys from that are stopping at the farm and things like that. So we kind of get this whole he's never been able to fully please his significant other in that sense. So it's always been a thing. It's Pearl gets what she wants from them, and then he gets what he wants in terms of being able to kill them. So it's like I
And
wonder if this is a symbiotic relationship.
it could be. And, you bring up the fact of him saying that, he tells her that he trapped Mia Goth in the basement. It makes me wonder if, since they already had a male body down there, what if she's looking, she wanted a female? Because clearly you can tell that she doesn't really seem to, she plays for both teams, is basically
Yeah,
what I'm
she seems
saying.
very
Like
sexually free,
yes,
way
she
more
does
than
not
like Howard
care
would
whether
be or
you're a
anyone.
man or a woman.
Yeah.
The only thing that they seem to both agree on is they do not like blondes,
Yes.
because she treats Britney Snow's character like shit through the entire thing.
And I'm
And,
curious if we're gonna get some sort of scene with like just because maybe there's a blonde character and something bad happens with that blonde character, and that kind of ties into that later comment. I feel like that's probably what we're gonna get here. So I'm very eager to see what's gonna tie in from X into Pearl, because I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
I agree. And I mean, really, I mean, now that we've kind of discussed all those aspects of it, and we've talked about the presentation, I guess really to kind of start wrapping this up a little bit, because we want to obviously cover this on Splattercast in much greater detail. I think once we actually get a little bit more behind the scenes and we can get a little deeper into it, this will be a great one to discuss all of that. And I think it'll be even better to discuss in our Pearl review, hopefully knowing what we've got. And I'm just spitballing this. If you feel up to it, if there's enough there, maybe we could do a little bonus video coming up into the following week where we kind of discuss a little bit more about that Howard and Pearl relationship if we
Yeah,
kind of get more answers and we can kind of revisit some of this conversation.
there we go. Let's do
Especially if that's something you guys would be interested in. If you like the conversation we're having and you kind of want to keep it going with us, let us know in the comments. Cause like, yeah, I mean, I could talk about this movie for hours and I'm hoping I can do the same with Pearl.
there we
But
go.
I guess the last thing I wanted to say was that Ty West, his filmography is one of those things where it's like, I've only seen a handful of things that he's done.
Same.
And, from what I understand is that he's definitely someone who really enjoys working in horror. And, it's just something where I feel like this is kind of really him coming out in his prime. And I'm curious to know if this trilogy is really going to elevate him. Do you think that, if executed properly, because this film's pretty much already an A for most people and most, critics and people in the industry. So it's like, do you think that this is going to make Ty West a bigger household name as we go along here?
I do. Because I mean, he's made some great films. I've seen House of the Devil, which I enjoyed a lot.
Hmm.
I haven't seen The Innkeepers, but I hear good things about that one. So it's like he has an exceptional filmography already. It just seems like he's flown under the radar for a general audience, really. And he's one that I've known that I've had to go back and uncover a lot of his films because a lot of people say the people have seen it say there's a lot of quality there. So, like with this one, I think X started a lot of buzz. I think Pearl's going to get an even bigger buzz. I'm really surprised again about the releases right now because I figured this one would be a bigger release than X was, but it seems as of today that we're still struggling to find those show times. But I think this trilogy is really going to kind of catapult him. I don't know necessarily if this is going to be the thing that people say you like a general audience says, "Oh, I've seen the X trilogy." I think what comes from this is something that's going to be a huge property that a general audience is going to be very intrigued by. So I think this is the catalyst to get him into that conversation to become, that John Carpenter kind of, those discussions of, oh, he is one of the top horror directors.
And that's where I pose another question for you. And then I have one more little segment that just came into the top of my head I want to bring up. Is there a property after viewing this film and knowing the rest of his filmography that you'd really like to see him tackle? I know we discussed Texas Chainsaw, but is there another one that you could maybe think of that we would attach Ty West to?
Another like established property?
Yeah, and I'm not just saying like it doesn't have to be the Mount Rushmore. You don't have to go, I'm talking horror or anything like I mean not, it has to be horror, but I'm not saying like Freddy, Jason, if unless you really think that he'd be a good fit for those, is there anything that you can think of where you'd like to see him pop up with?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. I'm probably gonna have to put a pin in that one. I mean, like maybe I can't think anything specific, but maybe one of the Universal monster properties. I think he could do well with. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. I mean, I think he could make a great Halloween movie. I think he's got a
Mhm.
knack for kind of the settings and things like that. So I think he can
The
nail
70s
it.
kind of tones that we
Yeah.
we are really itching for with that series because I
So it's
mean
like I think he can nail a Haddonfield kind of, that vibe. I think he could do that great. But offhand, I can't really think of anything specific that I would love him to do.
yeah, for me, the only thing that really stuck out in my mind is kind of a random one. But I think that he could have a lot of fun with it, especially depending on how they want to tackle the material. Would be like a My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
I just think like, with that being that kind of holiday centered around just like, love and sex and all that stuff, it's just one of those things where it's like, I think that he could have a lot of fun playing with a character like Harry Warden and that kind of, is the guy crazy? Is he not kind of thing? Who is the killer and all that? Like, I kind of want to see him do a story like that. And
And sorry to cut you off. I think he would do really well playing in that kind of space. Another one that just thinking of like House of the Devil and things like that. I think we've been so muddled with these remakes of Black Christmas that maybe he'd
oh,
be able to do
that was a
something.
backup for me.
Okay, I think he could do really well. I think he could make the definitive remake of Black Christmas.
Absolutely. And then I guess the only other thing is that I kind of want to bring up, and then I'll toss it over to you if there's anything that you want to discuss before we wrap this all up here, is that so we have like the 70s tone, the kind of, that's what we're going for with this, where it's almost like that, like you said, Southern horror kind of feel with this one, where in Pearl, and mind you, we've had some early reviews already come out praising the movie. The words that I've heard or the things that it's been described as is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho meets The Wizard of Oz. And I love the tonality shift between that film and this one. And I'm curious, what kind of era, what kind of tonality would you like to see for the sequel? Where do you think it should be set, and where do you think we should go from there?
That's where I kind of struggle with it, where it's like I don't know where this is going to be set. I don't know where they're going in terms of the story. Like with X, um, I don't know if they're gonna or if we're following Mia Goth's character after she had left the farm, or it's more so a situational thing with the farm and in the fallout there. in terms of the evangelical things. I don't know exactly where they're gonna go with it. I would love like a if we're gonna go the evangelical route, so a kind of I don't know, maybe a tone like First Reformed, something very different. Because we're gonna have that like the Technicolor stuff for Pearl. This one, again, Southern horror, I guess you would say.
Real
I think that
grimy, dirty.
in that third one, I think also has to be dark. But I feel like maybe they will tackle, because they focus so much on the evangelical stuff on the television, and there's something there with the Mia Goth character. So I feel like that's the route they're gonna go. I don't know. It really leaves a big question mark for me because I don't know where this. We know where the first two are going. I have no clue where that third one's going.
And that's what I think the beauty of this is it's like, I hate to telegraph things. I brought it up in the Barbarian review where it's like you see a movie's trailer so many times that you're sitting there and you're just knowing where everything's going to go. It's real easy in today's day and age to do that, where we have kind of the Marvel stuff, which again I will say I'm a shill for. I love my Marvel movies, but like you can kind of see where everything's going. You can kind of go into each of those movies and kind of get the gist of what's going to happen. I really, again, like you, I don't know where they're going to go with it, but I'd really think that it'd be nice to almost take this to the 80s and really give it into the true home of those classic 80s slashers where, it's like it's still cuz like the 70s, it's still it's like it's more in line of a 70s slasher. But with the 80s, I want to see more gore, more violence, maybe a little bit more over the top with the kills and everything. Because the kills here, I will say, although brutal, were pretty grounded. There was nothing that really stood out to me other than maybe Britney Snow's character's death with the crocodile. That was kind of one of those like, oh man, that was crazy kind of thing.
Yeah.
Real basic stuff of people getting stabbed in the eye, shot with a shotgun kind of stuff. But like, if we open this up in the 80s and set it 10 years after, we can really find ourselves in like those Friday the 13th style kills of just like, I'm going to stab this guy in the machete and roll his fucking wheelchair down a long thing of steps. And,
Yeah.
I'm going to stab these two who are fucking in the bed with a pole and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like we can kind of get a little bit crazier with it.
And I mean, to set this up here, where in X she says everyone's gonna know my name and she's hungry for this fame. Let's say we jump 10 years and she's famous
mm,
and she's got a horrible drug addiction, but she's like maybe a top star in that sense, kind of everything that she's always wanted. And then, someone from this town has the tape and, kind of harassing her of all this stuff. We're gonna release it, things like that, kind of being blackmailed, and then people start just dropping like flies around her, so we don't know who's doing the killing. She's being harassed, all this other stuff. You even can throw in some elements of Black Christmas of the phone calls being harassed, all this type of stuff. So I think you could really play with a lot of interesting stuff. Now that you kind of open it up, I do think maybe that she will be famous by the next time we see her in that actual sequel because we linger on it a lot. She brings back to everyone's going to know my face. I'm a star. I'm not going to settle for the life I do not deserve, all this other stuff. So I could see that. And then we do know that there is, some things have been filmed. So it's like, I think that all could play into that sequel.
Absolutely. I think that would be the most natural step, but again, we have no idea where this is going to go. We don't know
It's going to
where
be
it
a
could
ride for
possibly
sure.
hit. Absolutely. But I want to throw it over to you. I know I've been kind of, driving the car here with this, but I want to know, do you have any thoughts, any opinions, anything that you really want to dive into?
I just think this is such a unique film. I love those opening up a film with the aftermath and then kind of going back. I think that is honestly one of my favorite scenes of this entire film. Just kind of recounting exactly what happened. So I think it was overall very smart storytelling. I know a lot of people praise the cast here, so I wanted to know your thoughts on who your favorite character is, and then also what is your favorite kill.
I mean, for me, I'd probably have to say I like Mia Goth a lot. I think that she's fantastic. Just because she has the ability to play both those roles. And I know like that's a huge undertaking when it comes to this kind of stuff because like, it's so easy to get swept up in just like kind of playing it too similar. And granted, she is under a ton of makeup. So I guess you kind of get that physical differentiation, But for me, it's like I think that's such a smart thing. And honestly, like I like her kind of innocence that they kind of play into it, where it's like, and I guess I could say that for everybody too, because like I appreciate that nobody's really a scumbag here. Nobody
Yeah.
is really like, that classic kind of, like you said it earlier, like that Rob Zombie type, like, they're not all shitheads making pornos, you know what I mean? Like they're actually like, they have a goal in mind, they have a mission, and they're taking it seriously, but they're still fun and free and, just enjoying each other's company. It's refreshing to see. But I think for me, if you really want to talk standout, I'm gonna say Kid Cudi as Jackson. I think he has a presence to him. Not only is he funny, but he's a genuinely nice guy in this movie, and like I enjoyed his character throughout. But again, then I'm thinking about Bobby Lynn, played by Britney Snow. I've mentioned her a couple times. I think that she's funny and she's creative. I love when they're at the gas station and RJ is, getting that shot, and she's like, "Well, why don't you have him like, shoot it like this and have him hold the gas pump? Then it looks like his dick." And then he's just kind of like, "Okay, yeah, that's a good shot. That's a good idea." So it's like really, it's tough for me to pick, but I guess I'm gonna have to stick with Mia Goth just because again she's pulling double duty here, and I think that between her and Pearl, Maxine and Pearl, I should say, she's really the standout for me.
Yeah, and I really do love that Mia Goth character as well. I think she kind of holds that film together. But the cast alone, I mean, they all do such a competent job. Kid Cudi again as Jackson, I think great backstory. That again, I think they touch on just enough of the characters to find
That he's in
that you
Vietnam
want
and
to
all
care
that.
about them. With his backstory of being in the war and things like that, and eager to help. So it's like I think he comes off as really likable. Again, I think he's a character where you'd be like, I want to spend more time with him. For me, honestly, Brittany Snow in this is just phenomenal. Like when she is again, when you're talking about the scene at the gas station, and then when she's in bed after filming a scene with Jackson, and he's saying, I'm made for this, and she goes, she kind of fakes an orgasm and then kind of deflates him a little bit, and she goes, "Oh,
Yeah,
you did just fine." Like she's continuously the smartest person in the room. I feel
she
a lot
is.
of the times, and like to do that to a character that is not necessarily the main focus, I think shows just how well Ty West took care of all these characters because they're all so well rounded. Even Wayne, I think, is fun to an
Oh
extent.
yeah.
I
I mean,
think maybe he feels like the sleaziest out of them all because he's kind of the head guy in charge. But even then, he comes off as likable. Where
and
go ahead.
he's not so sleazy in the way that he's still like taking care of them in a
Yes.
sense. He's more of a leader, where it's like, yes, is he kind of being like, yeah, guys, let's make a porno, you know what I mean? Like, let's do that. It's kind of like you can tell he's in it for the money, but at the same time, he's never pushing anybody. Because like a great example of that is when Jenna Ortega becomes interested and wants
Yep.
to participate. And he's kind of just sitting back, like in that scene, you'd kind of expect his character to be like, oh yeah, let's do this, like yeah, like, and then add that pressure on top of it. But
Yeah.
he's very much just like, hey, like if she wants to do this, she is gonna do this. You
Yeah.
can't tame her. When he's talking to RJ, and
Yep.
he's like, you can't keep her in a box like this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm I'm not saying like this is right or this is good or anything, but it's like I'm just letting you know how it is. Like
Yeah.
she's her own person. And that's just so refreshing. Again, like it's just nice to see, especially something that is involved with this kind of a topic in the porn industry, that it's a very sex positive film. And and it seems like sex work is actually respected, and that's something that it's like, these women aren't really fetishized in a sense. Like they
Yeah.
really, and we talk about things in cinema where it's like you'll have certain movies, especially in this genre, when you go back to like the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, of just like the male gaze being a huge thing.
Yeah.
With this, there's definitely that, but there's also a level of respect there. And it's you can tell that they're empowered. They aren't, none of the women come off as weak or incompetent, or like they're being pushed around in any sense of the way. They all very much hold their own, and they are just as strong as their male counterparts.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that that is awesome. And some of you might rip me up in the comments and be like, oh, you're just fucking feminist or whatever. It's like, no, it's called good storytelling. It's called writing competent characters. All right, like that's what it is.
And I don't want to get sidetracked here too much, but as we talk, this is what we do here. In terms of a theme that you brought up earlier, about this kind of maybe Pearl brings them to the basement to have their way with, maybe some males that stay on the farm, and we kind of get in this discussion of like cuckolding and things like that, where it could be aggravating for Howard and Pearl to see basically that's what's happening almost, where it's kind of this trading of partners all the time, but they're filming something, so it's for a reason here. Maybe that's aggravating. And again, it's very intriguing because we're dealing with different generations here where they're seeing them as smut kind of people, but they could be doing the exact same thing. So that could be another source of aggravation for them. So, I mean, we're kind of drawing a lot of parallels here.
Yeah, and I mean, I forget exactly. I watched this just the other day, so it's escaping me, but it was either Pearl or Howard at one point is talking to a character and does even say, you come here and you flaunt yourselves around, and it's just like you're like, I think you said Howard kind of mentions that to Jackson.
Yeah, he says
Like,
you're here to entice you. You come here and you flaunt with barely any clothes on, and you're here to entice my wife. So I think that conversation that you're speaking of is with Jackson right before he pulls
yeah,
him away.
yeah, and it's like I really think that, that is another line that cements that whole thing for me, in the sense of just like they have a very toxic kind of relationship in that
Self-hating,
aspect.
almost,
Yeah,
this weird thing, which again, I'm excited to see expanded upon in Pearl.
absolutely. But I think we've talked quite enough on this. This is just a mere preview because, like I said, there's a whole lot more we can discuss. We didn't even really dive too deep into every aspect of the film, but yeah, I was happy to do this. I really was. It was a good idea to come out here and just kind of get this movie, at least something to you guys, so that way you have it, and our thoughts on it before we give you our review of Pearl this week. And I know we've been saying that that it's a little weird the rollout for Pearl for us, but don't worry, we either
We
way
got it covered.
we have it covered. It's close enough that we're not breaking our backs to go see it.
It's just
Um,
awkward that
it is
it's
just
not
a little
out.
bit weird, yeah,
It's
because
weird to search showtimes for Pearl, and you have, like, 2 instead of a
because we
handful.
we usually have our go-to theater, which is a good distance for both of us, and it just looks like it's not showing there, so it's a little odd.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, we're gonna have that review up at its usual time. Keep an eye out for the short on Thursday night, and then that puppy will be out Friday morning for you guys, as usual. So yeah, other than that, Luke, you got anything for the fine folks?
no, no, I am ready for that Ty West thrill ride. I mean, after Barbarian, it'll be hard to live up to, but I'm excited to see what they're offering from the trailer. It looks very exciting. Can't wait to see more in this Howard Pearl relationship. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun time.
100%. And if you guys are interested, go ahead and give us a follow at Instagram at SplattercastPod or Twitter. You can find us both on there. We'll be keeping the conversations alive. We're posting little clips, updates, basically letting you guys know when our content's coming out, when it's dropping, and just keeping the conversation going about horror. Anything horror movies, any new recent news, we kind of get in there and like to discuss it with you guys. And also, if you feel we deserve it, you think that we're doing a good enough job, or you're just interested in the content that we have going on here, feel free to hit that subscribe button for us. We are trying to reach 100 by the end of October, and currently right now we're sitting at 63. So we're making good ground. We had a nice big boost over the weekend,
Very
which I don't know
surprising.
where
Very
it
weird.
came from, but like we gained like 4 or 5 subs just in like a day. So like that was really cool. So we thank you guys for that. Anybody who recently subscribed and anybody who's been subscribed and just checking out our videos, thank you. We really appreciate it. Um, but yeah, other than that, we just had an episode drop this week for Chucky, Child's Play 2. So or Child's Play 2, it's not Chucky, but a Chucky movie. And that was a lot of fun. We definitely enjoyed that. So if you're interested, check that out. We deep dive on Child's Play 2 and discuss a little bit of the first one. And I had a lot of fun doing that. I'm a virgin to that franchise, basically. Like I don't have much experience with it as Luke does. So it does add some interesting elements to the conversation.
It was a good time. I think Child's Play is a lot of fun. I cannot wait till October to see Chucky season 2, and we got to get you into Chucky season 1 here soon.
I do. Yeah, I really got to throw that in there somewhere. I might have to start here sooner rather than later. But alrighty, guys. Other than that, that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.